Today I'm going to show you how to begin a colorwork project and maybe even get started. So I've made a pattern of Zoro from one piece, and I typically make these patterns with pretty flat colors. So this pattern calls for 6 colors, 4 of which we have here. I'm going to hold off on the white for his eye and his specific color green for his hair color because it's so further up on this project. That's 75 by 100 stitches. So when you do color work, you don't just want to work with your skeins, but instead you want to make small spools of the colors that you need, and oftentimes multiple spools of each color. We do this so that when you are switching colors, you don't have to crochet over the thread that you aren't working with anymore. So I will probably make more spools of black because there's way more, while it's not the most used color, it is the most changed color because it will serve as our outline. So that means anytime that there's a color change, essentially there will be black in between those colors. And I would recommend for things like that to use a binder clip, and you can wrap the yarn around the handles and then you can clip it to your project, because every time you finish a row you flip the project over. And if you have a bunch of strands, it can kind of get a bit hard and you have to untangle everything, and that can be a little difficult. So then you can just kind of clip these to the bottom of the project, so when you flip it, it's not tangling up with everything else. I've also used cardstock and just made like a little spool, I guess. I tend to cut a little flap here to wrap the yarn around, and then a little V up the top to give us a rest for our yarn. So I'm going to go ahead and start making some spools. Scoot these out of the way and then begin with our black. And then you just wrap it around the handles. And obviously you want enough so that you don't have to keep filling the spools back up again and again, but you don't want too much that it slips off of the handles. So for me, when it kind of gets full and I can still easily open the binder clip, is probably when I will go ahead and stop, or when it sort of is harder just to stay within the handles. So for me right now, this black is good. And so this one is set. And I think I'll do 4 more of these. It's kind of the binder clips that I have right in front of me at this moment. Because not only will I be using it for the outline for the shirt, but also for definition of his chest because the shirt is open, and also for the scar that runs across his chest as well. So that's what I mean when I say like black isn't the most used color in terms of like stitches, but it is the color that moves the most. And so you don't want to have to keep crocheting over something like black that you repeatedly use. So for me, it's just better to have these spools. And since it's just 1 stitch, oftentimes, maybe 2 in these little outline moments, I'm okay with using a smaller binder clip. If it was for something that would cover a larger surface area, I might use a binder clip that was a bit bigger, because certainly binder clips come in different sizes. And these are, I think 1-inch ones, so probably like a medium size binder clip. You can get bigger ones, or just really just use what you have, especially if this is your first time doing color work. I always don't, you don't have to go out and buy new things to try a new technique. So that's why I also use the cardstock ones, because most people have either construction paper or printer paper accessible to them that they can use to make these spools. I'm just gonna tuck that one in. Or if you just have just printer paper and it's not as sturdy as you want it to be, you can also just double it up. And I have some like promotional washi tape that I don't really use for crafting, but just to use it for something like this, where you can just double it up, tape the sides together, so that it doesn't bend as bad when you go to wind yarn around and around your paper. There's also something really relaxing and methodical of just wrapping yarn. So now I'm going to do 2 green, and I'm going to use the cardstock ones here, mostly because I know I just need 2, because it's just left side of the shirt, right side of the shirt. So that way I just have to make these 2, and I'm pretty much kind of done at that point with that color. And when I know that it's going to be a significant block of color, like the shirt will be, I tend to use the cardstock ones because they certainly hold a lot more. Again, if you get some like jumbo giant binder clips, that would be the way to go there. But again, just use what you have, what's easier for you to kind of work with. I also find that just doing this at the beginning saves a lot of effort when you're doing some like long form stitching project. They will bend slightly. This is one that's just a single piece of cardstock, where some of my other ones are doubled up, but these were just kind of on the top of the pile. And you don't want to do it so tight, but you don't want it to come loose, as these things are going to get moved around quite a bit as we're flipping the projects, as we're changing colors. Once you're done with the color, you move it to the front of your work. So these things move about quite a bit. Okay, so I'm going to call that one done. Leave a little tail, and then I just thread it through the little slit that I've cut so that it stays snug. I might actually do a doubled up one. I think I was trying to save those for the background color, because typically with the background color, you're doing the left side of the project and the right side of the project all the way up to the top. So those don't tend to move around as much as, say, your black or your skin color, clothing color. And so through the slit, and just start wrapping. As you can see, even with just the doubled up cardstock, it does not bend as bad as when you just have one cardstock layer. Okay, I'm gonna call that good. And set that with our rest. And then I think I'm going to do 3 spools. Well, I just have 2 cards left. And those will be for the background. So I'll do 2 spools of our skin tone. This will be something that moves around quite a bit because of the black detail that I'm going to be doing on the skin itself. So if I had another thing at hand, I would probably make 3, but it's not a huge deal. I would recommend that if you are doing something with white yarn, which we will be doing a bit later in this project when we hit Zoro's eye, because I'm going to do time skip Zoro where he has a missing eye. Sometimes simpler expressions are also easier to do. When I did Luffy, his eyes were shut and he had his sort of big cheesy grin. So I didn't have to deal with a pupil or anything like that. But when I did Chopper, because Chopper is so adorable and cute with his big round eyes, that kind of made that a bit easier. So for context, with this being not a small project, I think that in the pattern that I made, Zoro's pupil is just a black stitch. And I say all of that because if you have thread running underneath white, you'll definitely be able to see it. So that might be something that you want to try to avoid. Now we will do the second spool for the skin. And obviously if you're having a moment where you think I'm covering yarn up when I crochet more than I want, you can always just add another skein in. I've done that plenty of times. Sometimes this is a little bit of trial and error. And even when you look at the pattern, you might not want to make a spool for every single color change, and I think that's totally fine. You just want to make sure that you aren't yarning over your color changes to an excessive degree. Okay, so there's 2 spools of our skin color. And then I've done this red for the background. And let's see. I'm only going to start with, make 1 spool with this color. How I always start my color work projects is with a chain of the background color, just because trying to start off with something color change, that would be pretty difficult. So having just that 1 straight base chain to work off of, I think is just the better option to go with, at least for me. So what I'll do is I'll chain that 100, and then I will pull a chunk of yarn and wrap that around after the chain. So that's all one piece and connected. I have in the past left 1 skein of the background color, the one that's attached to the chain. But as colors get more complicated, or if you're changing a lot, that just becomes really cumbersome. So just sort of doing the chain and then literally kind of pulling the yarn out and then wrapping it back into a spool, for me was just more efficient, I guess is the word to use. And because I know that this color is going to be pretty much in the same spot throughout the whole project, I don't mind making these kind of beefy, much like our board Zoro. Also, in terms of supplies, I'll have in the description, but this is 408 acrylic yarn, and I'll use a 4mm crochet hook. I have Zoro and Chopper available as patterns. This is kind of my Zoro test to see if the pattern needs any adjustments, in case sometimes I've gone through and something doesn't look as proportionate as I like, so I'll go back and change where stitches are just to make things look a bit better. So I'd rather always test my patterns out before I put them up for you guys. I also have some free patterns available that are smaller in size. All of that will be in the description box. So now I'm going to move on to doing the base chain with our background color, and then I'll use that afterwards to make my last spool. This whole project will be worked with a 4mm hook, but I sometimes personally always do my base chains too tight and then have a hard time stitching that first row. So I size up for the base chain, and I use a 5mm hook. You certainly don't have to do that. Work with whatever tension works best for you. If you want your stitches even tighter, I would drop down to like a 3.5 hook, but mostly that's going to be entirely up to you. I wouldn't do anything bigger than a 4 to a 5, just because you don't want these types of things to be too loose. So to begin, I think I might actually zoom in a little bit. And we are going to do a slip knot. And then we are going to chain 75. This is probably a good time to say that I am left-handed, so if some of this looks or feels a little bit backwards, that is probably why, but we're always going to be kind of working in the same direction. So 75, I'll go kind of slow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. Let's get some more yarn. 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, and 75. So now we have our base chain. Obviously this is going to kind of stretch out a bit as we go forward, but that is our base chain. So now I'm going to leave my crochet hook in the loop just so that I can keep all of that together. And then I'm going to, the back end of this, make my spool. And then when we start our crochet from left to right, where the hook is will already be where we're going to start. It will be in our background color. I wonder if you guys can hear my dog snoozing in the background. Okay. And like I said with the last background color, I'm okay with making these ones kind of chunky because they are just staying on the left-hand side of the work, and then on the right hand side of the work. So there's not a whole lot of movement with these. So the less I have to sort of refill the spool, the better, just for ease of time. Okay, I'm going to do one more yarn pull for this one. Maybe one more. You can go a little bit more. All right. I'm just going to thread that through. So it says we'll end today with our base chain with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 spools made, and we'll be ready to get started on the next one.